Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, lace up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 141 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. As I sit here today, a story from my childhood comes to mind, and I'm going to get right into it. So picture, if you will, a 9-year-old girl. I was 9 years old, 4th grade. I went to Kimball School, which those of you that are familiar with Concord was maybe just under a mile walk from my house. And I walked to school every day with my neighbors. I lived in a neighborhood and we all met outside and walked to school together. When I was that age, my child abuse had just started. It was in the early stages. Internally, I was a mess and trying to make sense of what was happening to me and why. And my external life was quite chaotic. My parents fought all the time. My father was raised that it was the wife's duty to take care of everything in the household. His job was to go out and make money. We didn't make enough money to pay our bills, I guess. I don't know. And there were fights all the time. So my mother had started work, and she worked at the local hospital 6 a.m. until 2 p.m, 5 days a week. So what that meant for me was that I had to get up with my mother at 5 o'clock. I'm 9 now. And we would have breakfast together, and she would get ready, and she would lay out my younger brother and sister's clothes, Jonathan and Johanna's clothes. I was 9, so they were 2.5, 3.5, right around there. So diapers, and they weren't, I think maybe Pampers had just come into play by then, but I don't think so. And she would have everything ready and she would help me prepare food for them. And I would also eat my breakfast at this time and get ready. I was in 4th grade. I'd get dressed and be ready for school. And then I would wake up my brother and sister and be the person they saw in the morning. I'd sit them in their high chairs or at the table and I'd feed them breakfast. And I'd get them dressed and change their diapers if that needed to be done. I did all of those things. And then I would walk them to their daycare, which was around the corner. It was just like 6 houses away. My father was supposed to walk them to daycare, but this isn't something that he appreciated having to do. He would get a ride to work so that his ride would come pick him up. And if everything went well and sort of according to plan, this came off without a hitch. If it didn't, and Jonathan and Johanna were Jack's age, they were little, then it could fall apart relatively quickly. I became pretty good at just telling my father, just go to work, it's fine. And I would finish the morning and I would walk them to preschool and I would be late to school. I remember I would quietly tell my neighbors, just go without me, it's okay, let the teacher know I'm on my way. And they didn't ever witness too much of what was going on, but one morning, I think Jonathan was having a really rough morning. I think it was just a rough morning. And I know that I wasn't okay. I think it was shortly after an abusive episode for me, and it would take me several days and weeks to be okay after being molested. A big surprise. And I was trying to get them ready. It was winter. The house was a bit of a mess. We had a room off the kitchen called the TV room, and there was a porch and a TV in there. A couch and a TV in there, and the closet with all the boots was there. And I was sitting on the floor, and I was trying to get a big knot of shoelaces done, bootlaces, so that I could put their boots on. We didn't have Velcro boots back then. Everything was tied. I couldn't get the knot out. And Jonathan and Johanna were running around. They were upset. Terry and Jill and Michelle and Jackie, they all showed up at the door to walk to school. And my dad was just losing his shit. Like, my ride's outside. It was a mess. And I remember just stopping. I couldn't take it. I was 9. And I just started to cry. Like just sobbing and crying and sobbing and crying. And I didn't know what to do. And I had a very tenuous relationship with my father. I feared him. It wasn't a good situation. And so he waved his ride along and helped me undo the knots in the boots. And he was angry though. He wasn't kind. He wasn't apologetic that I was putting this. He just blasted my mother. And I was mad at my mother. Why did I have to do her job? I'm 9. Right? I didn't want to do this. And we got the boots done. And of course, Jonathan and Johanna are a mess. They're witnessing all this chaos at age 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. And then we all left the house together. And
My dad, he walked to work, and so he could turn left and take them to childcare, and I walked to school. And that memory stays with me. I'm 60 now, and it happened, 50 years ago. So it stayed with me a long time. The overriding theme from that memory is how chaotic everything was and how out of control I felt and how angry I was that I was put in this situation in the first place. And immediately, what any child that's being abused or mistreated, however you're being abused, does is self-blame, look inward. What could I do different? What have I done wrong? Should I get up earlier? I'm 9. I'm not old enough to raise a child. In growing up and rehashing memories with my brother and my sister, they had a lot of anger toward me because in their eyes, I was a grown-up. I was big. And I remember one time my sister reminding me of the time I stole a pickle off of her grinder, this big giant dill pickle. And I did. I stole it off her grinder. And she still remembered how angry it made her. And my niece at the time, Kelsey, was 7, and I was about 7 when that happened. And I pointed to Kelsey and I said, Johanna, that's how old I was when I took the pickle off your grinder. And she stopped. And I said, that's how old I was. I was 7. I shouldn't have been feeding you a grinder in the first place. I should have been enjoying my grinder. So for those of you that don't know what a grinder is, it's what we call subs in Concord, New Hampshire, grinders. I think back to those memories and I become just overwhelmed and anxious. Why am I sharing this now? Today on May 2nd, the day I'm recording this podcast. Well, I have a lot going on in my life. And today I lashed out at Kenny and Gracie. And it's because I'm feeling utterly overwhelmed and hopeless and helpless. So here's what's going on. We're having the sewer pipe from our house replaced. So that's going on as we speak. I'm looking out my windows now, watching this process. It's pretty amazing. So I had to rearrange my whole day, which means I have to miss a school board meeting tonight. And if you follow my socials at all, you know that I was lambasted by a couple of school board members for my terrible attendance as justification for me not having any leadership roles on the school board. And so I have to miss a meeting tonight because I have a couple of things I need to get done today. I am organizing a gala, which when you hear this will be just a week away, for Molly's 21st birthday. And it's a ton of preparation and organization. And while I have a partner and a daughter who say they want to help and be involved, they may want to, but they don't plan to, because whenever I need help, it isn't there. And so today I had to rearrange a meeting. I had to cancel a breakfast I was looking forward to. I probably won't get a workout in. And that's fine because I am a lot more than a breakfast eating athlete. I am a mother, I'm a partner, I am a homeowner, I am a facilitator, I am the founder of a foundation, I'm a podcaster, I'm an author, I do a lot of things. And so sometimes days are going to get ahead of me and I'm going to feel like I'm sitting at the bottom of a closet with my 6'6" angry father screaming at me and my toddler siblings crying and feel utterly helpless and angry and confused. And that was today. I know that by day's end, I'll feel better about things. But what got me to this point was the conversation with Gracie and Kenny. I come in and I'm sitting on the couch and I realize if I don't record this episode today, I'm going to be late. And that puts my editor, behind that this is the day I need to record it. I have a crazy house full of people. I had asked Kenny, okay, take Jack and go someplace and go do something fun. And I need to record the podcast. So I come home and I sit down on the couch. Now, I've gotten up. I've done my morning. I've gotten Jack ready. I've eaten breakfast. I've changed my clothes. I've gone outside 2 or 3 times. I've called the city. I'm trying to make all of this work. I come home from the meeting that I had to reschedule until later, full of information about the gala. Hope that people come. I say to Kenny and Gracie, okay, you guys about ready to leave? I need you to record a podcast. And Gracie screams at me, I would need to take a shower. She's just furious that she can't. And I said, well, Gracie, you can't because they're replacing the pipe. And she was livid that she couldn't take a shower. Now, maybe she's got a whole host of things going on because she's normally not like that, but she was. And in my mind, she was just this entitled little jerk. Oh, I'm so sorry you have to smell for a day. So I yelled at her. I said, take baby wipes and wipe your pits and wipe your crotch and put on clean clothes and live your day. Like, are you kidding? So I was really frustrated. And when she left the room, I unleashed on Kenny a little bit. And I said, yeah, I know the story I'm going to share in my podcast today. Because there I was in the floor of the closet, just angry that I'm running around doing everything. I'm doing it all. And I'm facilitating work with the contractors, and I'm calling the city, and I'm filling out permits, and I'm organizing theater venues for big galas and going to restaurants and planning all these things by myself. And the complaint my daughter has is that she can't take a shower. So anyway, I just have had I've just had a hard time. The other reality of today is it's May 2nd, and May 2nd is the day that Molly actually died. 1:36 a.m., that tumor ruptured in front of my face, inside her head, and killed her. And so it's very difficult this week of the year, to not remember step by step, minute by minute, what was going on. It's 12:45 right now as I record this, and at 12:45 on Monday, May 2nd, 2016, my daughter Molly was in brain surgery, having a tumor taken out of her head, hoping she'd wake up. And I know now that the doctors pretty much knew she wouldn't. This Sunday is bereaved Mother's Day, so it's Mother's Day for people with dead kids. The following Sunday, May 12th, is Mother's Day, mothers with alive kids. And then this podcast will air. You can see in the process of these next, 16 days until Molly's gala, I have the high up of the happinesses and the low of the sadnesses. I have the peaks and the valleys. All sorts of emotions will be running through my head, and they are as I speak. And so that got me to thinking of themes and how I try to get through these experiences in my life, how I try to maneuver and manage the bad things, how I try to make sense of the nonsensical. It's what you do when you have something like child loss and job loss and the horrifying losses I've had since I was born, really. So anyway, I got to thinking about the Kintsugi theory. So it's a Japanese theory. The Kintsugi means that if you want to repair something broken, repair it with molten gold. So take a vase and glue it together with molten gold. So when your vase is re-glued, it is twice as beautiful as it was before. It's not fixed, it's not perfect, but it's been repaired in such a way as to be magnificently beautiful in its broken reality. I was a guest on a podcast called the Kintsugi Heroes Project. And the whole philosophy the man that founded this podcast lives by is using what breaks you to make you more beautiful, to how can you create beauty in life out of something decimatingly broken. And so, Barb, decimatingly broken, that whole idea and concept stays with me. So I got thinking about quotes and my life and all that I'm going through. So the next connection to all of this is my kitchen and my yard. And so sometimes to fix something, you have to break it. And so to make my kitchen the beautiful kitchen it is today, I had to tear apart the old one. There was nothing wrong with the old kitchen. It was a beautiful old kitchen. But to be a modern, accessible, bigger, brighter, better kitchen, we had to break it. We had to wreck it so that we could rebuild it. You couldn't just tape a new kitchen on top of the old one. And that process was difficult. Watching the walls come down, watching the floors get pulled up, watching it disappear has been devastatingly difficult for me. My yard is no different. I wrote a blog or an email about taking the fence down. The fence in our yard is gone. It took us 8 years to be able to take apart that fence because it was the last thing Molly put together on her last alive day, April 30th. Right now, looking out my window, my yard is full of a backhoe and a tractor and a dump truck and a plumbing truck, and it's dug up everywhere. We're moving the driveway. We're repairing a sewer pipe. The yard, this beautiful yard that has looked a certain way since this house was built, it really has not changed. That the angle of the road has changed. Some of the dimensions have changed, but the basic layout of the yard has remained the same since the house was built. And now it's unrecognizable. And this is incredibly stressful for me. I just want familiarity. I was getting out of my car and I was talking to my neighbor up the street, Buddy, and he goes, we're creatures of habit and we find comfort in things being the same. And we do. There's some sort of safety and sameness in keeping things the way they were, holding things together. And of course, that doesn't work. So I looked up some quotes because that's what I do. And the first thing that came to mind for me, which was sort of this morning and which has been a huge theme in my ability to finally realize that the Roy that I loved didn't exist. I know I just jumped into Roy right there, but Roy is such an integral part of my life since 2005. I can't not include him in what I talk about. But I have this idea of wanting to hold things together, that if I keep it together, it will somehow be okay. And that's what I spent years trying to do that before Roy, before Molly died, with Roy after Molly died, and now the last 3 years without Roy. It's been this massive thing. So sometimes life imitates art, imitates life. Yes. And so here's the first quote I came up with, and it's by Erin Morgenstern, who is an author and a visual artist. I am tired of trying to hold things together that cannot be held, trying to control what cannot be controlled. I am tired of denying myself what I want for fear of breaking things I cannot fix. They will break no matter what we do. I should have this put on a shirt or a mug. I should have it made into a poster. I should paint it on the ceiling of my bedroom. Because this is a theme for me. I insist on things being a certain way. They can't stay a certain way. I start giving up what I want to hold things together or to make other people happy or do what I think I should. And then I fall apart. And it's easy to, I've been called selfish by people in my life, that I'm only ever thinking of myself. And I look at it the other way around. I'm always thinking about other people, but it doesn't mean I'm selfless. So this theme for me, trying to hold on and fix what can't be fixed. I can never bring Molly back. I can never be unmolested. I can never be poorly treated by Amy and Roy. I can never be undemonized by Chris Rath. I can never be unfired. I can never be unbrain tumored. I can't undo anything. We can't undo or change anything that's happened to us. We can only take what's happened to us and figure out how to move forward with it. The next quote that I came up with, and this relates to my kitchen and to my yard as a nice sort of metaphor for everything I'm going through. The beauty in brokenness is that it allows for the possibility of growth and transformation. Let me say that again. The beauty in brokenness is that it allows for the possibility of growth and transformation. So breaking up my kitchen, looking at it torn apart, looking at the skeletal structure of the house allows it to be made more beautiful. But there's beauty in that as well, in the simplicity of the beams and the joists and the wood flooring. So I'm looking at my yard right now, and there's a big trench, and in it was a clay pipe, which I took a picture of, full of shit, right? Every time you flush or pee or take a shower or wash clothes or do the dishes, it goes through that pipe. And it's buried in my yard. I've sat in a chair right on top of that pipe for the 24 years I've lived in this house. And the shit has flowed beneath me. It's just amazing to me. But it's happening. It's happening down there. I look at the scar in my yard right now, and I think of a quote about invisible scars being the most beautiful and meaningful. And I see sometimes the deepest scars are the ones that cannot be seen. So much of our day-to-day function in our day-to-day life is epitomized by digging up a hole, fixing what's in the hole, and reburying the hole. In the 2 months from now, when I'm sitting in my newly landscaped, beautiful yard, this will all be a memory, a poignant one, but a memory nonetheless. And it's just mind-boggling to me that all of this is happening right now, this week. When I signed up to do these jobs and thought about Molly's 21st birthday gala, I thought all 3 would be done by now. I thought my kitchen would be done months ago. Had the kitchen been more done months ago, the landscaping could have started earlier. I did not think in May that any of these things would be happening. May, the month of Molly. I'm here in the middle of the day. Part of my head is just making a list of all the things I'm not getting done. The other part of my head is thanking the universe and God and whatever is out there that creates all of this for giving me such tangible examples of reality. As I've been watching the workers work in my yard, as I watch Mark, my carpenter, spend hours to create something that's just right in a house that has not one true right angle in it. As I watch Tom and Michael, my landscapers, dig and shovel and build and create beauty. As I watch Tom and Michael and my plumber, John, in a trench, digging up a sewer pipe while urine and poop flows right out of it because it sits in there. You can't empty the pipe necessarily. It dawns on me that we live in a society that can minimize these people, tradesmen, yes, plumbers and carpenters and landscapers and lawnmowers, welders and such. I did a whole podcast episode on the little people, and we were all standing watching. And I'm watching these 3 men in a hole full of shit, laughing and smiling, digging, creating, They're going to fix something, some really nasty, smelly thing that makes taking a dump attractive, because we can sit on a toilet full of water that some people don't have enough to drink, take our poop, flush it away invisibly, wash our hands, go back to our cocktail party. And what happens to that poop is invisible to so many people. And yet we have human beings that sit and stand and kneel and work in those very trenches to create this beautiful reality. So those that are too fancy for it can live in ignorance of of how this all works. This might be hard to follow. I have so many thoughts going through my head, and I'm a famous transgressor. But I'm just sitting here in my frustrated bottom of the closet, tangled knot of shoelaces mindset, seeing how broken and battered my house is right now, in my yard, in my kitchen, in my garage. Everything is a mess. I'm trying to plan this huge gala that I'm afraid nobody will come to because that's me. And I'm doing it all by myself, which I just need to do it by myself and not worry about it, right? It's the way that it is. And wonder, why the hell does my life never change? Why do I feel like this is me all the time? So am I not gluing myself back together? Am I remaining broken and using my brokenness as an excuse? Am I the unfilled trench with flowing poop in it? Or am I the finished yard? Am I the process? What am I? How do I navigate my way through all this chaos? And I think some of it is just being mindful about it, looking at the reality of it. The best part of my day so far, this crazy, chaotic, frustrating day, is the time I spend outside with these men working in my yard, digging it up and managing the invisible reality of poop management so that I can live in my house and turn on my sink and flush my toilet and feel okay about things. Does that make me Miss Molly any less? No, not at all. Not at all. This brings me to a quote about brokenness and wholeness, which I think is kind of what I'm looking for here in this episode, that just finds me in the worst month of the year now, a month I used to love so much, and a month I'm trying to make better. Between being a mother to 2 dead children, and if that sounds harsh, I'm not sorry. They're dead children. It's what they are. They didn't pass on. They didn't move along. They died, one in my belly and one before my eyes. So I get to celebrate being their mother on one day, and then I get to celebrate being Gracie and Jack's mother on another. Mother's Day will for always and ever and always be a difficult day for me. This is a quote from Goodreads, which is a wonderful book app, Goodreads. Every part of your brokenness will play a part in your wholeness. Let me say that again. Every part of your brokenness will play a part in your wholeness. It's really the broken among us that can contribute a lot of our quest for full, equal justice. I mean, when you're broken, you know something about what it means to be human. You know something about grace. I'm going to read that one more time because I think it's worth hearing again. And I know you could just rewind the podcast and hear it again, but I'm going to say it again. Every part of your brokenness will play a part in your wholeness. It's really the broken among us that can contribute a lot to our quest for full, equal justice. Talk about justice in a minute. I mean, when you're broken, you actually know. You know something about what it means to be human. You know something about grace. I remember doing a lesson when I taught children's classes at Green Acre, and it was like a kindergarten class, and we talked about grace, and that grace was somebody seeing you suffering or seeing something and helping it without necessarily taking credit for it. Sometimes it's like manifest coincidence. I don't know. But I asked the kids to draw an example of grace. And a little boy drew 2 tulips, and they were curved over. So they were obviously wilted. And there was a bright sun in the sky. And then the next thing was the same 2 tulips still bent over and the clouds forming. And then the next picture was the 2 tulips standing up straight with raindrops on them. That was his idea of how he understood grace at age 5. I still have that picture somewhere in a folder somewhere. It was the most profound experience for me. And this quote ends with grace, which I like about it. But what it shows me and what it tells me and what it should tell everyone that's had some horrible thing happen to them is, number one, you weren't chosen to be fucked over. You weren't chosen to be raped or abused. You weren't chosen to have a dead child. I don't believe that I got chosen for this. I don't. I believe that we all in our lives sometimes narrowly miss amazing opportunities and devastating realities. I think that's just life. And I think our steps and decisions take us in all those directions. Hence my podcast, 1,000 Tiny Steps. I do think and believe that once you can accept and manage that you're broken and that being fixed doesn't mean you can be the way you were. I understood this right away when people would say to me, I just want the old Barb back. Well, I'm so sorry. The old Barb had a live Molly, so she's never coming back. The old Barb had a full-time job in the Concord School District. She's never coming back. You can't be who you were before great tragedy or great joy and triumph. You can't, because those things change you. I had a runner once ask me if I thought having a baby would change me. And my response was, it better. I'm going to be a mother. That's something I'm not right now. So I look at my life and all the things that have happened to me. Once I can accept the fact that my brokenness is a reality and that fixing me doesn't mean making me better or making me higher up on the acceptable scale or making me more acceptable in the eyes of God. It doesn't mean any of those judgy things. It just means recreating a level of wholeness within me. In a few hours' time, that sewer pipe will be buried. It will be covered with dirt. And in a few months' time, the fabulous swimming pool will be on top of it. And I will be enjoying the summer sun with a true understanding of the pipe that goes underneath my grass that manages every flush in this house I've called home for almost a quarter of a century. Right? Wholeness coming from brokenness. When I have my new kitchen memorized enough in my muscle memory that I can stumble out of bed in the morning and stagger down for my first cup of coffee and know exactly where that coffee pot is and exactly where the mugs are. When I can stagger into the bathroom and sit on my toilet without the light on because I know where the toilet is, right? I'll have wholeness. I'll have a measure of beauty that was created through breaking it all apart. So these are things I'm breaking on purpose. Yes, sometimes I think of divorce when couples realize this isn't working, we need to get divorced. I think when there's breakups, when friendships end, when religions change, or you no longer believe in something and you believe in something else. Anything that you end, anything that you deconstruct can be willful and mindful and on purpose, right? So you break something down to make it better or to make it whole in a different way. My yard won't be like a Kintsugi vase held together by molten gold. My yard will look perfect, but it will not look anything like the yard that preceded it because it's a new whole. My kitchen, I've kept enough details so that I can stand in it and see what it used to be. And I have a carpenter who is utterly gifted at taking the flow of what was and blending it in with what now is. So this wholeness is much more Kintsugi relative than the yard because there's still so much evidence of what the kitchen used to look like. Above the beautiful new granite countertops and the shiny stove is window trim around my windows that is clearly not new. It's surrounded by brand new cabinets and cupboards. It is not new. That woodwork was put up in this house in 1905. It is decidedly old. It's in one kitchen. It's a new kind of wholeness. So I look at me recording this podcast 3 days ahead of bereaved Mother's Day, 10 days ahead of Mother's Day, in the midst of Death Week, every day, a stark reminder that Molly's gone and will always be gone and will never come back. And that I will never, ever be that Barbara Higgins ever again. In the midst of my broken apart kitchen and my messy yard and my dug up lawn, not knowing how this big party I'm foolish enough to throw, that's how I feel right now, and feeling unsupported by my family, which is how I feel. I'm not saying that they're not supporting me. We're all doing the best we can. I just think sometimes that this is the nature of life. You know, looking at our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? What we're promised in our constitutions and our Declaration of Independence. People think we grow up and we have a right to be happy. No, we have the right to pursue happiness. We don't really have rights to anything except perhaps dignity and being treated well. You know, we can't impose our rights on others. And that's a whole other podcast episode. I don't want to digress. But I understand that in the middle of Death Week at Dartmouth Hitchcock 8 years ago, I laughed, I visited, I hugged, I smiled, and I sobbed. And in the middle of Death Week now, I yell at my kids, I yell at Kenny, I yell at the people on the other side of the phone at the city permit office. I'm kind to Michael and Tom and John because they're knee deep in shit right now so that I can have a nice house. I know that the Molly's Gala will be a huge success. If you haven't bought tickets yet, please come. Show up at the door with $30. I'll let you in. I know that in the midst of the chaos and the anger and the brokenness, that everything will be okay. In terms of my childhood, and I'll wrap up this podcast going back to that day. I was 9 when that happened, and it took me until I was 13. So 4 years of living that way, feeling like it was my job because I watched my mother struggle and I watched her disappear for hours at a time. I loved and nurtured my little brother and sister so much that they thought I was their mother. And so I had a very, very, very overly close relationship with them. I watched my father and my older brother. I don't mean to discredit them or discount them, but their behavior at that time was horrifying. It wasn't supportive. It wasn't helpful at all. And I took on the responsibility of making sure everything stayed together, of holding it all together. And this is a tragic reality that I've carried through in my whole life. And it allows me oftentimes to be really taken advantage of. But I look at how long it took me to get to the point in that chaos where I could just say, you know what? I need to break this. I can't fix any of these grownups in my life. I can't fix what's broken here. So I need to just tell my truth and get out of here, which is what I did. I told my truth and I took off. Went on vacation with my grandparents and took off. And I can't say that the fix was perfect, but that chaos stopped and things got better. And I know that this chaos will stop, that I'll do some social media tour of my beautiful new kitchen in my house, in my yard, sooner than later. And I'll remember this day with a bit more of a smile on my face than I remember it now. So, that I just feel like sometimes we have to find the beauty in the broken. We have to find the beauty in the broken. What's broken in your life? What do you need to break to fix? We can get so hung up on not breaking things that we realize that we stop fixing things. So, I don't get a ton of feedback on any of my podcast sites on my questions that I throw out here. I get some feedback with texting and on my social media, but I am always curious for people to share with me what their broken things are and what they're trying to fix. But I'm going to try to have a good rest of my day and hope that the final product of this podcast, which my fabulous editor will make sense of somehow, comes across. But I guess my biggest share item today is to look at brokenness with the Kintsugi philosophy, that even when you put something broken back together, it can be as beautiful as it was before, even if it looks broken still, or it can look like nothing like it looked before and still be beautiful. And that in reality, sometimes we are hopelessly in love with a memory, and that the memory can't exist in the way that it did. And I'm in love with so many memories that are not today. Be good to yourself. I'm trying to be good to myself right now. I'll do the best job I can. Once you're good to yourself, be good to someone else. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.